Welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, a XenTegra podcast. We like to call them content with context, and that's because we try to bring the real world to meet alongside of all the cool information that Nutanix is sharing with us, all the new innovations and announcements that are coming out from Nutanix, one of our key partners. I'm your host today, Phil Sellers. I am the practice manager of Modern Data Center. We call it Modern Data Center because we know that customers are doing this hybrid thing to get the job done. And so we've built a practice around hybrid cloud. So no matter whether you're on-prem, in a hyperscaler, in managed services, we're here to support you in all those different places. And so our practice spans those places. I'm really happy to have my friend Jirah Cox on the call with me today. So Jirah, how you doing?
Good, man. This is not the show to come looking for this old data center. That is a whole different show that you watched on PBS on days when you're homesick after Price is Right. So this old data center, different channel, different time. This is the modern data center.
Yeah, this is the modern data center. Yeah, I think this old data center was in black and white, if I remember right. So
Yeah, a lot of things spinning for some reason in the background. Yeah.
That's right. Well, Jirah, happy to have you here again. Always learn so much when we get together, and that's whether that's here on the podcast or in real life. Um, Got to see Jirah last week. I did some training at Nutanix headquarters, and it was fun to see Jirah spar with Wayne Conrad live and differing opinions, but a great debate about our industry and where we're at and what's going on. So uh, it's always great to spend time with you, man.
And you as well. And I have fond memories of me taking that class years ago and the things I learned. I still work with the SEs that I was teamed up with in that class from a design exercise perspective, and Wayne taught my class too. So yeah, for the most advanced preparation for our highest level certifications. Keep your eye out for our NMCID classes that teach you how to design Nutanix solutions in real world scenarios like an enterprise architect. It is a wonderful class, and I'm so glad you were able to able to attend it, Phil. And also, yes, of course, totally glad I was able to see you as well.
Well, I got to say, it was a highlight to see kind of so many of the high level Nutanix folks in one place. And shout out to Wayne, did a great job uh, leading us through architecture and the Nutanix way of approaching architecture and projects and things. I learned so much. It was a great stretch. It was a great challenge. So happy to be a part of things like that. And it's just another example of how the company's not standing still. We're moving forward, and there's a ton of things happening. Really love the blog post we've got today. It's talking about Nutanix Unified Storage taking the lead from MLPerf, one of the benchmarks in our industry. And I'm really excited to dig in on this because we all love performance. At the core, if we're a true nerd, we love performance. We want to go fast. So shout out also to Daniel Chilton, who wrote this blog post. It's posted out on nutanix.com/blog. I guess let's talk about first, I guess, the benchmark. This is a huge milestone in terms of performance achievements and just proving out the technology. But let's give a little bit of background, I guess, on what these benchmarks are and kind of how we use them in the industry.
Yeah, if we ever launch a second podcast, by the way, the true nerd might be in the running for a title. That's just too. I'm just putting a pin in that. That's too good to let slide by. So no, this is a wonderful blog post. If this episode sounds interesting to you, you'll want to pull this up and give it a quick read yourself, because there are some really valuable numbers in here that we won't be fully diving into. That's not what podcasts excel at, is reading tabular data to listeners. Hopefully not. So this is a wonderful benchmark that is used to understand data platforms and how fast those platforms can then fire hose data over to things like, in this case, AI training farms, right? So how fast can I feed my farm of GPUs that I probably as a business already invested a bunch of money into to train a new model or refine a new model? I need a bunch of data that I then will feed into that field of GPUs that they can think about, draw new vectors in the databases, and then lay down on disk. And so this is using Nutanix Unified Storage, right, as a way to support that. So I'd love to see this because this has been part of a message I've been trying to even work on and refine for my own delivery. Like, as we think about what is truly new in the modern data center, right? Things like containerized workloads and things like AI ML. How does that interact, right? Put the puzzle pieces together with things that we already know about, right? Things like NUS, things like AHV, things like virtualization, replication, all that good stuff. And so seeing this as a way to not just in the HCI world, not just in the in the NAS space, but just like data platforms in general, what can feed those AI models dizzying amounts of data? And it was actually really delightful to see Nutanix Unified Storage here at the top of the chart.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part, right? So we're turning the curve here. We're talking about AI, but underneath that is that cloud native sort of architecture, the containerization of applications. Where does that storage live? NUS is a integral part in that story because we're talking about object stores, we're talking about file shares, all of those things NUS does extremely well natively on the same platform. So you're not going out looking for another vendor and trying to pull multiple different solutions off the shelf and integrate them. This is one cohesive platform that gives you all of those things that you need to be successful when you're trying to do AI, when you're talking about machine learning in your data center. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thread that's not necessarily specifically called out here, but I want to kind of highlight because for me, that's the value of the platform, right? It's the comprehension across all these different areas.
Totally. And the article makes a really good point, right? That when it comes to interacting with AI from a developing, a training, an inferring perspective, or even tuning, right? Like sort of last mile refinement process. So often the right answer could be go rent the GPUs that you need from the cloud, right? Like for most folks, that's not the right kind of capital investment. The frequency of training might not be there to justify that kind of a purchase or investment in an owned owned and governed asset. But renting could be fantastic for that, right? Like that's literally the equivalent of like I go to another city, I Uber in that city because my car is not there. And so what I love about the way that this benchmark and testing was structured was, of course, both with an on-prem NUS cluster, but also a NUS cluster running in NC2 in public cloud as well, right? That's even more. There's ways that this benchmark, I think, demonstrates really, really amazing performance out of the NUS platform. Part of it, of course, the on-prem, we can imagine what that would be used for, literally everything that I would use for data storage. The cloud one specifically, I think really speaks very, very well and directly to that. I want to rent a farm of GPUs for a while, train my new model up, my new LLM, and host that data temporarily. Maybe I bring that data from on-prem, right? Replicate it from on-prem to NC2, train it, capture the output, and then I can retire all of that, right? And it's very much an on-demand sort of service model.
Well, I think it's worth talking about. We've had our supply chain issues, right? So you may not even actually be able to procure the hardware you're looking for if you were trying to do this in-house. So
That
not
is,
only not make monetary sense to
yep.
maybe have your own GPU farm in your data center, but it may be also logistically impossible to get your hands on some of that equipment. So
That's a flavor of
there's
Yeah, that's a flavor of literally every AI conversation I'm a part of these days. Is no matter what hardware vendors in the room, right? The customer's almost sort of like taking their temperature on what's your connection with NVIDIA. Do you have the hookup, right? How fast can you get the yes, servers are great. I'm sure your management's fantastic. Supply chain, and we can get you servers fast. Tell me about your hookup with getting me the NVIDIA chips that I really want ASAP.
Yeah, and it is a true problem. I mean, we've been in this cycle with GPUs for a long time because of Bitcoin and trying to mine Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But AI has put another strain on that supply chain and the ability to even get the hardware. Poor gamers, I feel bad for you because you can't get your hands on a GPU, especially not at a reasonable price anymore.
Well, and a fun little sidebar thinking about, uh, how do you describe it? Podcast with context?
Content with context.
Content with context. I should really start reminding myself to ask the customer when they're giving the hard press to the OEM around GPU lead times. Hey, tell me about your power whip lead times in your rack in your racks, right? In your actual cages, because that's also another supply chain constraint to think about. If it takes you 3 months to get new power circuits, then that becomes your new constraint, not the GPUs hitting the dock.
Well, and I think it's a very real concern for us as we're talking about also the power constraints we're getting into with the new processors. Each generation becoming more and more power hungry. There are a lot of data centers that are just out of power. There's
Yeah.
not adding a new whip, not adding a new circuit. There's no more to be had inside of the facility. And so, um, as we talk about things like AI, where it is also very power hungry, that definitely is a real world constraint. Um, Having a little bit of flashbacks to last week, talking about constraints in designs and architecture. Um, but us talk about the results. So we've got a NAS cluster sitting behind an AI infrastructure, got everything set up. We throw MLPerf at it, and let's talk about the magic.
Yeah. So for this test setup, for the test rig, uh, the what was interesting here, and this is something I'm not an expert in yet. I want to go learn some more about simulating NVIDIA H100 accelerators, right? Which because I can understand why you wouldn't want to, as a vendor, have to go procure those just in order to prove yourself on a benchmark. So I'm so curious what that kind of what that simulation looks like for an accelerator. But what's cool is, yeah, not to bury the lead here. So Nutanix top of the charts here, right? Supporting over 1,000, like 1,056 NVIDIA H100 accelerators, which would be, I mean, that's several mortgages worth of GPU there,
Mhm.
all up and running at the same time. As usual, right? As is should be no surprise from Nutanix with linear performance scaling, right? So this was with that 32 node cluster, which in our parlance, when you have a 32 node Nutanix cluster, you can also therefore run 32 instances, 32 sort of scale out file servers that
Mhm.
all make up the NUS system there. So we can have a dramatic amount of file servers that all work together as one logical unit that all team up that then can fire hose this farm of over 1,000 H100s here with data, um, supporting that training effort, right? So then, but the scaling means if you have 16 nodes, you can be pretty confident you could train over 500 of these things,
Right.
right? So the linear scaling really gets super valuable. And there's a wonderful footnote here around the performance per node is definitely irrespective of the location, right? On-prem or in the cloud. And back to really how you started us, Phil, around um, where's the customer data center, right? On-prem, is it in the colo? Is it in the cloud? Does it connect some subset or superset of all of these? And so that ability to say your data center now is part of it can be permanent, part of it can be on demand, part of it can be owned, part of it can be rented, and it can really be truly software defined, right?
Mhm.
That stays your data center, and now these are things you could do quote in your data center.
The word that comes to mind as we're talking about this is flexible, right?
Yeah,
Give you choice as a customer, and that's an important aspect of how you're hosting your infrastructure. It's consistent, but you've got flexibility. The thing that stands out to me here is when we look at the chart, the number of accelerators achieved here for NUS is double the next
yeah.
closest competitor in the chart. So that's also telling that the architecture, the scale out is a huge benefit to you as a customer. I see some other scale out architectures on here that I recognize the names of, and so it's not just scale out that's helping tell the story here. It's also the underlying storage subsystems that are highly efficient and driving towards these performance capabilities. That's huge.
Yeah, so we're transitioning from we didn't I never said it, the ResNet 50 workload. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure if you're into training AI models, means much more to you than it does to me. So for the ResNet 50 results, yes, Nutanix number one there, and really doubling the number two and number three results,
Yeah.
which definitely is great to see. Also, a strong showing here on the next chart, the UNet 3D result as well. This one using A100 accelerators, not the H100s, where we placed second on the chart, but really at about 80% of the result that the number one result delivered, and about 3x the result that the number three result delivered. So still in kind of a very differentiated, there's really only top two results here that are impressive. And on this one, we're second behind one of the solution, but hanging pretty close there.
Well, and I think it's important, and there's a call out just above the chart. You're a leader in both the linear performance scaling and the absolute performance. So, the linear scaling can't be denied, right? That is a constant concept when we're talking about Nutanix, when we're talking about software defined. You add a node, you get performance. You add a node, you get capacity. So that scaling is a huge advantage.
Well, and there's another great note there that catches my eye, and I'm sure this speaks to the world that you and I live in day by day, right? As we talk to people about Nutanix solutions, and of course, literally everyone in the world has some other solution if you're not on Nutanix today. And there's always that sort of philosophical, oh, but my current storage network is lossless. Oh, but my current storage network is
Mhm.
ultra low latency. And this is us number two in the world here for what is being disclaimed here as a throughput heavy, latency sensitive workload, right?
Yeah.
And that's us as a software defined x86 based on top of virtualization solution running a virtualized NAS on top of that and
Yeah.
still melting faces at a low latency solution.
You know, this kind of calls back to an experience I had in my last role. We had lots of different branch offices, and they were all connected in with a particular vendor's routers. Um, and we had MPLS connections, and those should have guarantees of service and higher levels of guaranteed throughput and things like that. So, we had those, but they were low bandwidth because of the cost. We switched to regular internet, where the characteristics, the latency, all of those things were significantly less known, less controllable, but the overall user experience improved because bandwidth was king. Bandwidth overcame so many of the issues. So I think this is another sort of corollary to that, where even though you're not on a lossless network, you just going ultra fast sometimes is better. And so even with the error correction and all the other things that need to happen underneath the covers, you're still able to achieve amazing results. Um, and some could say my MPLS was lossless. I had guarantees of service and things like that. I know it's not the exact same thing, but it kind of rings true to me. Sometimes other factors come into play rather than just that low level piece of the puzzle.
I can think of a neat little analog, right, to something it's near and dear probably to at least half of our listeners' hearts, right? And it applies whether you're iPhone or Android. But like in the latest version of iOS, right, there are ways you can run functions of that OS as a real-time OS, right, compared to a standard OS where execution is not predictably governed and scheduled on a CPU basis. Um, and so that ability, think about, it's literally our hyper-converged pocket computers. They get better and faster every year, whether you buy the new one or not. Right? The improvement is relentless. And that ability to say, maybe you really do need true, I'm equating here real-time computing to a lossless network. Maybe you really do need it. Maybe just throwing a whole bunch of horsepower at it in a not guaranteed lossless fashion also is fit for purpose, right? End of my stretched analogy there.
Well, and I think there's a great corollary to what you're talking about with all of the AI stuff coming to our mobile phones. We're seeing the same sorts of things happening now in our pockets that we're talking about in the data center. And the explanations here, we were talking about ResNet, a little bit more of a description. Its image classification is the duck. Is it a duck or is it a house? So that's what ResNet is trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I have that kind of feature where, now if I go into my photos and search for a dog, I can find all the photos with a dog. These are great, simple examples of where we can go with this in business, right? So, um, the application of something like this that I've seen for customers is really around video data, real-time security and things like that, looking for threats in video streams. And that's incredibly powerful to help schools and other places stay secure, schools and government buildings and whatever else, looking for things like that. We can't spot it as a person this fast. And so I had a really interesting conversation with a customer talking about, the lift that AI can give within different verticals, different industries. And the lift that's possible sometimes isn't realized because of where you have to train these large language models. So to tie all of that little bird walk back around, being able to do this on-prem where your data is resident, when you can't relocate it to cloud, when you can't do those things, is a huge capability boost. Had a really interesting conversation with a research organization where their data is their crown jewels. They don't want to load it out into a cloud. This gives them a viable pathway to take that, create and train a large language model that then they can monetize with their members. That's where the application of this comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, obviously we live in the Apple ecosystem, so we know that one better. But just that AI is coming to our pockets, right? AI is coming to our phones because that's where the data is, right?
Right.
So, and that really rhymes with the way a lot of businesses are thinking about it too. My data is here. I want it to stay here. AI comes to it, and then we do interesting things with our data, right? We help the business move forward with that kind of an approach.
Well, and that brings us right back to where we're at in the blog post: on premises or in the cloud. Why not both?
Yep.
We're getting the same performance, which is fantastic. We have access to the GPUs in both, which is fantastic. It could be a game changer for companies, and we're in the infancy here of this entire concept. You're not the only vendor that's playing in this space trying to solve it, but there are lots of things that Nutanix is doing to make it consumable, easy for enterprises to take this concept and apply it and find practical applications for it. Let's talk a little bit about that inferencing and tuning, no matter where you're at. We've got hefty CapEx expenditures, so that's required if we're doing it on-prem. We get to use the cloud if we go there. What's kind of that next step for us with this data? I think there's something here, and it's not talked about in the article, but just around data services and the power of that to port your data once you've got it trained.
Yeah, I mean, I think portability, it remains such a key hallmark of I'll call it like IT governance, right? Like if you owned everything on-prem in multiple data centers and you went to, your leadership team and said, I have no ability to move this from our own data center A to our own data center B, wouldn't go super well, right? So likewise, right, when it comes to, we have stuff on-prem, we have stuff in the cloud, it's absolutely critical to maintain that portability of like, it can be placed here today and it can stay there as long as that's optimal. When any other external factor makes that less than optimal, we can move it back into a more optimal state, right? Move it into cloud, move it from cloud A to cloud B, move it from cloud back to on-prem, or any of the above, right? So that portability is totally huge. And yeah, there's no one size fits all answer, right? Because AI is so many things. Like there is the training where you do need to, back up, truckloads of GPUs all at once in parallel for new model development. Most customers will stay more in the inference space where they want to use a trained model that wasn't trained on their data to then look at their data securely and privately with performance, of course. And then, do business support style decisions, or employee efficiency style operations. And that can be done in the cloud, that can be done on-prem, or a combination of those together, right? What's there's a chart coming up here that again is people on microphones reading charts to people in cars, of showing this really like it's really up to you what's the right use for your app of really neck and neck performance of NUS on-prem or NUS in public cloud, right? Both of these can be valid solutions and wonderful solutions. And a quote that we shouldn't go by too fast. Even Amazon's marketing, right, talks about their new EC2 P5 instances, right? That a lot of this kind of ultimately could end up in a kind of a so what standpoint. Well, giant punchline that business cares about. When you can reduce cost to train ML models by 40%, that is absolutely real money, right? So that's cool, right? Absolutely use the best hardware to train stuff. It's almost like kind of a race to sleep kind of condition of I want to do it as fast as possible so that I'm done doing it as fast as possible.
Sure.
But where's the data going to come from, right? Where are you going to fire hose these awesome P5 models with data? Oh, hey, that can be NUS. That can be NUS living in your cloud tenant, living securely there with total data governance, encryption that only you have access to, and high performance, right? Data that you sent into it, data you get back from it. No loss of governance there, other than can I go hug the server when you're running that in NC2?
Well, and then I got to think, that almost warrants a comparison to being at a parking meter, right? Like you got your data parked here on
Yeah,
NUS and NC2, and you got to pay as long as it's parked there.
yeah,
So
meters running.
yeah, meter's running. So as soon as you can get it, trained and then move that data back away, you're not paying the taxi meter or the parking meter anymore.
Spot on. And that's just begging for wonderful automation pipelines, right? Around
Mhm.
when we do this, I'm not going to wait for a human to click a button, right? Like I need my overarching automation framework that can do this for me.
Well, and that's the next step, right? So you take all of this in a laboratory, somewhat under pristine conditions, right? We've got these amazing results drag racing on the NUS bus. Um, so what's next, right? Uh, the next step is a Nutanix validated design around it. So let's talk a little bit about NDDs, what they're useful for. We've talked about it before here on the podcast, but that's kind of the next step of the training is should implement things according to, I hate to use it, but I have to, best practices.
Yeah, they're best for a reason, right? Um, if you ask the customer like, do you want the better outcomes or the worse outcomes, right? Well, you get the better outcomes when you use the best practices, right? Um, the but you're right, they're not like a hammer to go hit someone over the head with and win an argument. So this links out to our NVD using AOS 6.7 for Nutanix GPT in a box, which is totally worth its own separate read for the listener here. Go check it out. But it shows you a very opinionated design and how we've successfully proven it to deploy the full stack and then offer really AI as a service to the business, right? So of course it's going to run AOS storage, run AHV as the hypervisor, and then offer an ability to, of course, host NUS as the data repository. Of course, you'd manage it all with Prism Central and NCM, and then really operationalize AI in VMs or in containers or however the right way you want to get that up and running and offer it to your business logic and application teams. So that's what that is. Really teaser maybe for separate future blog posts there and future podcast episodes, but fundamentally it shows you kind of a blueprint, right? For like, here's how you can quickly go deploy this in your data center and get it up and running. It's very much a proven solution, not a science project, right? So
Yeah, it's something that is clearly repeatable. It is a design that you could take and that we often take, in positions as a VAR or as a SE at Nutanix. We take these NDDs. We know that they're battle tested, and these are the things we build our designs on for customers. So I think that's the takeaway, right? This is not just a cobbled together science project. But you said two things I want to kind of pin in on. One is it's an opinionated stack. So for people that maybe are cloud native architecture, we talk about opinionated a lot. What does that actually mean?
that's a good question. I would define it as there are other ways you could do it. This has been selected to yield certain benefits, right? And you should be able to articulate those benefits.
And it's primarily, and we generally use it, and I think the way you mean it, and this is Nutanix's solution at all these different layers, right?
Sure.
That's when I think of an opinionated stack, it's using all the Red Hat components, it's using all the
Yeah.
Nutanix components. That's
I
sort of like you could pick and choose, and you could substitute something for some of
totally.
these, but this is using ours.
And that's the value of a good architect, right? Is being able to understand and agree with or substitute certain decisions, right, and still wind up with a good product.
Yeah.
For if you have different compelling events or different constraints or different reasons, I think of it almost as a funnel. Is the way I describe it to our SEs. Is you have supported, right, which is kind of very binary, right? You are or are not doing something or have a configuration that's supported, and then you've got best practices, and then you've got reference architectures. And at the
Mhm.
bottom of the funnel, you've got a validated design, right? So the validated design has the most decisions made for you and is the least sort of open to interpretation, because it's literally like if you go build this, we guarantee this is the result you get, right? There's not a lot of wiggle room in that.
Yep.
But the reference architecture is a bit more permissive, right? It's like guiding you down. You probably should be in one of these two categories or areas, but a lot of things have been solved for you. Best practices are more nebulous, right? But they're getting you right down the right direction. And then, of course, supported is very much like you either are or you aren't.
Yeah. And the second thing I wanted to pull out, because I think you were on the Nest bus and I think it was speeding by this point, but I wanted to point out, you're talking about GPT in the box 2.0. When I referenced earlier, Nutanix is doing things to make this easily consumable. GPT in a box 2.0 is one of those things, right? It is that opinionated design, but it's highly orchestrated. You can go and kind of order it up in Prism Central. This is something where you're working hard to make it easy for the customer to deploy and start to get results from this technology.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I mean, for lots of good reasons, right? It helps us improve the product, right? Because when we're testing it ourselves the way a customer would run it, guess what? We're going to push for the best kind of results, like we are highlighting in this blog post. Helps customers, helps our sales teams, right? Because when we're in the room saying we can do something, right? Well, okay, but how do we prove this out?
Mhm.
Matters, right? And the answer needs to not be, well, you just go buy it, buy everything, trust me, and try it, right? Having these kind of proven results, proven designs really, really does matter and gives clarity to really both halves of that relationship much, much sooner.
Yeah. Well, I love the wrap up on this because it comes right back to the nerdy stuff that we love here. In just a year, X has doubled performance. And we saw that earlier in the chart, comparing 2023 to 2024's performance on-prem only. And we've doubled performance in both the cloud and on-prem in 2024. How'd they do that?
That's the benefit of having a software-defined stack that we can run identically everywhere. So when we improve it in one spot, it improves in both. The three key highlights that we call out here. So the first one I love, right? So we say ICER, it's iSCSI over RDMA. This is really rolling out for all customers really everywhere that they're running AHV. In a nutshell, I'm working on my own talk track for this as I help get SEs up to speed on it and then really get the message out to customers as well. If you picture the way that we've always operated since the beginning of the company, right? Since we were, only on ESXi, since we were only even just doing like VDI, we always operated with vdisk reads and writes come from the VM itself to the virtual SCSI controller and the hypervisor
Right.
to the hypervisor itself, right? So ESXi is in the read write path for everything. AHV was as well. To then AHV sending that read and write data to its local controller VM where we do all of our data fabric data placement and governance. And then, of course, responding back with, here's the data you requested, right? So everything had to traverse through the hypervisor. This is my simplified explanation. With ICER, we are skipping that, right? The vdisk itself knows how to call the local storage controller, and even our hypervisor is now not in that conversation, right? So we're actually leaning into how can we even cut some corners here to get more performance with zero compromise on security or availability or governance, but how can we shorten this phone call, right, and have fewer parties involved, even when we're cutting ourselves out of it, right? So that's what ICER is doing there. So now it's in this case Nutanix files calling the Nutanix storage controller directly to get this I/O done and dusted faster. And then, of course, also improvements on NUS itself, right? I know the team's been tirelessly working on even that code set around what runs in those NUS VMs as file servers there. So working on high performance and throughput for those. And then, of course, a tried and true, but worth always reiterating, linear scalability, right? So
Mhm.
are we delivering, as we add more, like call it what it is, bare metal resources, are we able to use those both as an HCI platform and then the deployed workloads like say NUS here, to take advantage of what you're bringing to the table as a customer hardware wise?
Yeah, and I think that's great. And so someone may be listening, they may be going, "Hey, this is fantastic, but I'm not touching AI. I'm not touching ML. What's in this for me?" Um, and I think that's the huge benefit here too. You want to talk about what's in it for everyday users?
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, so everything we just covered around like why is this fast applies to whatever kind of data you want to put onto or pull off of Nutanix Unified Storage NUS. So whether that's video data, right, for NVR, which whether you just want to hold on to it or do AI analysis or inference on it, right? Like you probably think you might be in one camp, but you're only one email away from the other one around, hey, heck, can we scan this? Can we get predictive analytics? Can we get sentiment analysis of our data we already have? Um, Whether that's containers, right? Like always a hot topic of how do I help my developers? Um, Similar thinking to the AI, right? I could do it in the cloud faster. I could do it on-prem more privately. Which one's going to be right for me? And of course, we say you can do it with us anywhere you want to with privacy and performance, with containers as well, right? That container solution is going to need some kind of data storage solution that can
Right.
be NUS and should be NUS for a bunch of different reasons. NUS has tons of container native, Kubernetes native storage solutions, and of course, even really everything that we know NUS is already a great fit for, right? If you're hosting your VDI profiles on this, those always work better in a faster model, not slower, right?
Yeah.
Departmental shares, even under socialized use cases of NUS. Like if I put this on big, cheap, and deep nodes, now this is a super, super valid backup solution as well, right? That brings all the benefits of Nutanix around linear scaling and growing when I want to, and no forklift upgrades. But now, guess what? It also has performance improvements as well.
Well, you missed one, and that's immutability.
Oh,
And
yeah, of course, yeah, totally.
yeah, I mean, when we're talking backup use cases, immutability is king. That is what we're all chasing today is protection against ransomware. So all of those things and performance to your point.
Totally nailed it. Whether that's immutability once it's on disk, right, and that would do stuff like prevent either unapproved or compromised admin account deletions, but also even how do we help keep you out of that boat too with stuff like our cloud-based data lens observability that's watching for those ransomware attacks and doing everything it can to stop them even earlier and faster wherever you choose to run the product, right? So definitely belt and suspenders for that of let's try to prevent and also guarantee on the back end.
Well, this was a cool discussion. You know, it's not an application for every customer, but it's applicable to every customer. And I think that's what I like about the work that's being done, the optimization in the software stack. Everyone's benefiting from it. So, really fun discussion today. I've enjoyed it. Any closing thoughts?
Honestly, I'll personally just say thank you to our NUS team here at Nutanix. I know this has been a huge amount of work for y'all, so thank you for doing it. This is a wonderful result and validation of everything you guys do all day, every day. And then for customers, right? Like this is super super easy to learn about, but also even to really try out, right? So talk to your Nutanix account team, talk to your XenTegra team around how quickly can I see this in my environment, and what can I use it for to improve my service to the business.
Yeah, I'll echo on that because I think we skew a little more towards NUS. We're NUS bus riders here for sure, um, because we do so much in the VDI space, right? And it's such a great combination, all within the same solution for us to be able to do profiles and user data. And so I talk that track a lot with our customers. So hugely applicable to everybody, most of our XenTegra customers. But as Jirah said, yeah, we're here to help solve these kind of problems together, help you understand what you have access to. At the end of the day, that's kind of the desire, especially from the modern data center practice. We just kind of want to help you, um, let you know what's available, help you know how we can put these things together for your benefit and to meet your business needs. So
If your data center has appeared on an episode of This Old Data Center in the past, you need to call Phil.
We
Have a
need a
little chat.
renovation stat.
Yeah.
But Jirah, it was great catching up with you as always. Appreciate the discussion. And for everybody listening, we'll talk to you on the next episode. Thanks for listening and have a great day.